Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Welcome back to the podcast. I have naturopathic physician here, Dr. Anthony Balduzzi. Really excited to have him on today's podcast. Dr. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Justin.
Awesome. Well, you're the founder of the Fit Father and Fit Mother project. So, as a dad of two kids, two boys, energetic boys, I know it's important as you become parents, as you hit your 40s, that you maintain a high level of fitness, longevity, not just feeling great, but having that energy to keep maintaining for decades to come. So, I'm excited to have you on and chat a little bit about some of your strategies and some of the things that you do with your patients and clients as well.
Love it. This is
All right.
exactly what I do.
Awesome. So first off, tell me a little bit about your story. You have a unique background. I mean, you kind of came from an Ivy League background. You were a personal trainer, bodybuilder for a while. You have a unique past. Love to hear your story here.
For sure. I kind of got into fitness from, a little bit of personal tragedy. I was born in upstate New York and I grew up
Mm,
on the East Coast of the United States and had a great childhood, outside riding my bike, playing with my little brother. What was
yeah.
unique about my childhood, though, was I watched my dad basically work himself to the bone. And I think, like many parents, he just wanted to provide for us so much that he entered a high corporate career, a lot of stress. Some of his health routines got put on the back burner. And he eventually got a cancer diagnosis very,
Wow.
very young in life. And I watched his health deteriorate through all of the traditional medical approach to cancer, the radiation, chemotherapy, some surgeries. And he eventually died when he was 42 years old. I was
Wow.
9 years old when that happened. And it rocked my world, as you can imagine, to lose a parent that young, to see the impact that had on me personally and on my mom, my little brother. But also it changed my psychology from a very young age. And I realized, like, immediately, that health is so foundational. Like, I saw my dad like trade his health effectively for providing. And he wasn't able to balance his routines in the right way. And in my 9-year-old brain, I was just like, hey, I got to figure out how to make myself strong and healthy so this doesn't happen to me. And so the real gift was my mom gave me a pair of my dad's old dumbbells and I started to train right after my 9th birthday. So I started to lift weights and I started to feel better. And I found, as I started to exercise, I started to heal emotionally, spiritually, and it started to shift into this passion of, like, how do I really maximize my health and well-being? And in time, it went into personal training and bodybuilding, and how do I help other people do the same? And so now the work that I do is I run the Fit Father Project, which is primarily helping busy dads, just like my dad, guys who are over 40, trying to juggle work and family and life responsibilities while still being fit and healthy, like, help them pull that off. And we have Fit Mother Project as well that does the exact same thing for the ladies side. And I'm happy because of the tragedy of my dad. We've had over 100,000 people in over 100
Wow.
countries go through our programs and just see amazing results. And,
That
this
is
is just,
amazing.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your dad. Like, what was his profession? How many hours was he working back then, stress wise? And what was his diet and lifestyle like?
For sure.
Like
And
processed
it's
food or standard
yeah,
American kind of diet?
some of that. I mean, he definitely had a very high stress life. He was working in computer leasing during the time when computers were
Mm.
getting really big in corporate. And,
Oh
I remember
yeah.
him sleeping at the office sometimes. And it was multifactorial with his cancer. Is it absolutely
Oh,
true
he
that
had a cancer too?
he had cancer? Yeah. So stress and circadian rhythm disbalance, like,
Yeah.
dysregulation is associated with pretty much all chronic disease. And he
Yeah.
was definitely on that train. Could it have been different if he would have done different things? For sure. But who knows exactly what caused it? But what I found was striking is when I, fast forward, I'm in naturopathic medical school. I saw so many people coming into my office with all types of, like, cardiometabolic chronic disease that was due to lifestyle. And, like, it's at the root
Totally.
of what's happening in Western civilization is we're not managing our stress, our circadian rhythm, our nutrition inputs, our exercise inputs,
Yeah.
and we can't figure out how to get that all going. So my dad has had his own flavor of that. And everyone else listening to this has their own pressures and challenges with that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's lifestyle is driving most of our chronic disease right now. And the way to fix that is obviously some amount of information, but it's more about, like, habits and rituals and routines and, like, making the rubber hit the road and creating a
Sure.
sustainable health plan.
So what are some of the foundational diet and lifestyle changes that you try to tweak out of the gates? I mean, cutting out processed sugars, grains, trying to, get inflammation down, trying to improve nutrient density. What does a foundational dietary shift look like when you're working with someone?
Love it. Yeah, and it's right. I mean, what you just said is the truth. Is the food input can either be, creating health, or it's creating
Hmm.
inflammation and problems. So you
Yes.
need to nail that. And the way we like to look at nutrition is people have a general sense of what healthy foods are. We're looking at, like, less processed foods, whole foods, but more importantly, we like to help people establish structure. So before we get into the exact foods on our meal plans, we help people establish a set meal timing routine. So for some people, this is like the classic breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner. Like maybe that
Hmm.
works well with their schedules and their families. For other people, this might be intermittent fasting, where they shift back that first meal, or they have an earlier dinner and earlier breakfast. But we help people become proactive, because what we find is most people struggle with nutrition because they get reactive, because they don't have a plan, and also because they can't balance these factors of both variety and consistency. And what we
Hmm.
are big believers in is in the beginning meals of the day, particularly breakfast and lunch, or meal one, meal two, is really good to be consistent, to dial it in, to
Mm.
have go-to meals because you're busy, you're prepping the
Yeah.
kids, you're doing whatever. Like, just get stuff that agrees with you, that has a lot of good micronutrients, as well as the
Yep.
proteins, fats, and all the good healthy things you need. And I give you examples of what that might look like. And dinner is
Mm.
a time to have more variety. So I think it's actually more about the structure and the habits than it is about the foods. But the foods that we do have, just generally speaking, in terms of our approach, is we are a lower carbohydrate approach in terms of
Yeah.
our programming, but we still allow people to have carbohydrates. People are eating, some people who can tolerate it can eat some organic sprouted breads. They can have berries, they
Yeah.
can have squash and sweet potato. It's about the portions. And I'd say most people are
Yeah.
keeping their carbs on the lower side. We're like a moderate to higher protein intake. I think like people are typically having some kind of protein with their dinner meal paired with some kind of carbohydrate. But we help people, most importantly, like figure out the foods that work best for them, because there are certain foods that are just straight up inflammatory for my immune system, as you know, that are we fine
Yeah.
for you. So people need to kind of dial those things in. So we help people set a meal one, meal two, and we give some frameworks and recipes for dinner. And it's all about sustainability and creating the routines.
That's great. Now, your story is just really interesting to me. So, you had this role model of your dad working really hard for the family, and then he passed when you were what, 12?
Yeah, well, I was 9 when he
That's
died, and then yeah, right
wow.
before my 10th birthday. Yeah,
Dude, that is such a tough time to lose a parent, especially being a boy, losing a father figure role model. That's tough. And then you went the training route, and then you went to Ivy League Penn, right? To get
yep.
your what was it a master's or bachelor's
That was
in
that. That was.
neuroscience?
I did my bachelor's work there, and I studied psychology, nutrition, and neuroscience at Penn, and had some really cool experiences there. And
And we were
I
talking
was
about it.
bodybuilding at the time. Yeah.
That's great. We were talking about a pre-show. Like you go to an establishment type of Ivy League school. Typically,
Mhm.
that's a pathway to medical school or PhD. We
Yep.
talked about that earlier. How did you make that U-turn to do something maybe less conventional, right? On the naturopathic kind of natural side, people are like, "Hey, why aren't you going to medical school? Why are you being a PhD?" How did you make that shift? How did that
Well,
happen?
I was fortunate to do a couple things. One is, like, when I was at Penn, I did research at Penn Med, and also
Yeah.
in some neuroendocrinology labs, and I got to see like the behind the scenes of like what real primary research looks like in
Right.
the Ivy League, and participate in that. And like, it was cool stuff. I mean, I was glad that I did it, but I also saw that, like, man, it wasn't really moving the needle for people directly. Like, I always had a little bit of a heart, and maybe it's because of seeing my dad pass and going through this hero's journey of myself, of like wanting to interface and help people like more directly. So there was that. And then two, I was deeply into fitness and bodybuilding in my teens and 20s. Like, during this time when I
Mm.
was at school, I was into competitive bodybuilding. And what was amazing about that is you learn how to dial in your nutrition, your exercise, your
Yeah.
supplementation to such a degree that you see these profound effects it has, obviously, on your body composition, but your performance, your energy, and just how important these habits and routines are. And this was not something that was steeped in Western medicine. I mean, it's coming around
Hmm.
a little bit now, but like, I knew that there were some other aspects and other ways to have medicine that's based around these primary inputs. Which naturopathic medicine is one of those that is. Chiropractic medicine is another one that is. It has a
Yep.
holistic approach of looking at the body systems, looking at all these inputs in a more holistic
Hmm.
way. And so I guess I was just kind of like primed for that philosophically. What was interesting is maybe there's some early seeds that were planted as well. When my dad was going through his cancer and all the therapy there after some surgeries, he had some serious neurological issues. And so my family sought out all sorts of different therapies, including acupuncture, which was something
Hmm.
that did help him regain some nervous system function, after some of his therapy. So maybe it was like already a little preceded, but I also had some good guidance from my mom, who was directing me to these kinds of things. And I don't know, it's just my path to find this. And I don't even say I would consider myself, yes, I have a naturopathic medical license, and I could say I'm a naturopath, but it's just like, these are all tools to help and serve people. I love natural
Yeah.
medicine. I love fitness and bodybuilding. I love the psychology aspect of it. It's just I love helping people, and these are just different ways to do it.
That makes sense. And this was the incipitus. This was the motivation for you to create the Fit Father and Fit Mother project.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. And so, the average parent, right? They're probably exhausted. They're probably working hard. today's kind of cost of living situation. A lot of times both parents have to work, which then
Hmm.
means you got to come home, make dinner, still try to find time, spend with your kids. You're maybe
Yep,
feeling guilty because you're working so hard.
for sure.
Then you have no time for yourself. So, what are the first strategies that you try to implement with parents that are trying to get their health back in their hands, so to speak? What does that
For
look like?
sure. Well,
Yeah.
you nailed it. I mean, that is the pressure cooking pot that all these most parents who are struggling are in. You feel like you don't have time to exercise, you don't have a really good set nutrition routine, you're
Yep.
stressed, you're looking for stress outlets, and oftentimes those are not very healthy. And then you're trying to manage your kids, you put yourself last, all of that.
Yep.
It comes down to having and nailing a great daily routine and a weekly plan. And I think
Hmm.
it comes down to understanding the priorities of what you actually first spend your energy on. Like,
Hmm.
first off, I'll just say this. A lot of people think they need to go exercise more. Exercise is so secondary or tertiary to your health and body composition and weight loss goals. You got to nail your hydration, nutrition, and sleep
Yep.
first. Like, it just
Yep.
needs to be. Otherwise, you're pushing a giant rock uphill, metabolically speaking. You don't need more high intensity exercise if your nutrition's crap or if you're not sleeping well. So,
Right.
understand the priorities can be a little bit freeing, because we've had people lose over 100 pounds just walking, eating good nutrition, and like not even doing formal workouts. So, like, it obviously exercise is great when you can slot it in. And I'll touch on exercise because I'm bringing it up here. I think it's important for people, especially busy parents, to when you can schedule in even two, maybe three high intensity exercise sessions per week. And that could be like 20 to 30 minutes. Like, you can do these things at home. So you don't need to be like spending a ton of time in the gym to get profound benefits with the right kinds of exercise. And
Right.
we prescribe the type of exercise that's using functional motions, the motions
Yep.
that you want to be strong at 40 and at 70, squatting down, standing up, pressing overhead, pulling and pushing towards your body.
Yep.
And these look like squats, swings, shoulder press, rows, push-ups. And we do these in circuit fashion with dumbbells or kettlebells. These workouts can be like 20, 30 minutes. They're incredibly effective. They can give you a metabolic effect for over 24 hours. And it's just a really good way to train. So, but like, that's, you sprinkle that throughout the week. It's about nailing the daily plan. The daily plan starts off with what you do in the morning. Wake up, morning rehydration. Know when you're going to have that first meal. That first meal might be eggs and fruit. It might be a protein shake smoothie recipe. It might be overnight oats or something like this if you're doing
Yep.
vegan, vegetarian. But you got to have a slotted in first meal of the day whenever that comes. Again, we like to standardize that lunch meal, which is often protein and greens. It's a healthy sandwich recipe on some organic sprouted bread, if that works for you. It's leftovers from dinner the night before.
Yep.
We help people establish go-to snacks, non-processed
Yep.
stuff, fruit and nuts, jerkies, some
Yep.
bars that aren't full of crap, but like,
Crap.
it's
Yep. Yep.
pre-planned, it's in there, it's good. So you have something in slot. And then dinner, we teach people to build like a perfect plate, which is half the food is with some kind of fibrous veggie that you enjoy for some good fiber, prebiotic fiber. A quarter is some kind of healthy protein, and a quarter can be healthy carbs or healthy fats. So I know we're going quickly, but it's like this routine of the day. When you start to literally focus on getting a greater grasp, I mean, it starts with the nutrition structure and the daily
Sure.
routines. You start to build momentum, and momentum begets more momentum. And so that's like the key. So you're looking at the daily plan, the weekly plan. So a busy parent, your plan has to fit into your life. It has to fit into your schedule. And so it takes a lot more thought than people just saying, I'm going to get on a fitness kick or follow something that's not sustainable. And that's where you can get a lever on this whole busy chaos thing and get something that works with you and actually gives you energy and removes a lot of the thinking.
Yeah, I tell patients out of the gates, if they're seeking out people like yourself, myself, they're consciously incompetent. They know they don't know
Yes.
stuff, and they're trying to find people that can help fill in that gap. And then, okay, now you start to know stuff. You're consciously competent. Well, that's like driving a stick transmission for the first time. It's like
Yep.
clutch, shift. You're looking down,
Hmm.
look at the road, steer. And
Yes.
it takes a lot of energy to do those things. But
Yes.
at some point in a few months, you're driving that standard transmission like it's not automatic, right? And
Yep.
so that's kind of where we're at. I think framing it out to people out of the gate, knowing the first month or two is going to be hard
Yes.
until you get these habits at that unconsciously competent
Yes.
type of state. And I think what you're talking about, keeping it simple, and allowing the tasks that have to be done, making them simple and small and easy, I think
Yes.
really helps make it more bite sized and applicable, if you will.
You nailed it. You win the day,
Yeah,
you get that
yeah,
momentum, you focus on this, the rhythm, and that's your whole life effectively doing that. And it
yeah.
takes a couple months, about 2 to 3 months to get really into a groove.
So when moms and dads come to see you, how does it work? So that they sign up. Is
Mhm.
there like kind of a video kind of sequencing where they start off with diet or hydration or electrolytes or food? How does that work? And is there a customization involved to what that person needs? How's that work?
For sure. Yeah. So we have like it's the whole like fit father and fit mother like hero's journey completely laid out. So someone signs up on our websites, they say what they want to join the program for fit father, fit mother. They after they sign up, they get welcomed into our community, which is like an area like a community program and community area where they have basically the whole journey. And the first thing we start with before we even get them into the meal plan and have the videos and the recipe book and all that stuff is we have them do a journaling and mission statement, because what we
Mm,
found is you need to get people aligned at like a very deep level for them to be successful over the long haul. And so we have them go through a deep journaling and reflection exercise that culminates in them writing a mission statement, because this kind of comes back to some of my Ivy League training in psychology is we don't just
yeah.
operate from our logical prefrontal cortex. We have this deeper limbic system that has all of our emotions, our memory, and all these
Yep.
different aspects that ultimately drives unconsciously and subconsciously a lot of our behaviors. And we want to get all those things aligned. We want to give the neocortex of a clear plan to follow. We want to get the emotional buy-in from that limbic system. And then we want to
Mhm.
clear the path with the right kind of environmental factors. These are things like food prep, buying the right kinds of things, getting around a supportive community. So when these three aspects are together, you're very successful. So the mission statement is the very first step. Then we get them into the nutrition plan. So this looks like a combination of bite-sized video training as well as the exact meal plan, all the done-for-you recipes. So people don't need to do a lot of thinking as they start to get up and going. They just kind of slot in the things they know that's going to work for them, and they get going in nutrition. The cool thing about nutrition, you get this in, you can feel so much better in like a week to 2 weeks. First thing you'll notice is probably your bloat decreases, energy levels go up, and then you're like, wow, this actually saves me time. So the nutrition's the first step. Then we get them on daily walking, which is we
Yep.
believe is so foundational. It's like humans are meant to walk. High intensity exercise is icing on the cake, if you will. But
Yep.
daily walking, formal workouts get sprinkled in. We teach them how to do that, and then we help them build habits where we're checking in every single day for the period of the program. It's me in there as well as our actual coaching staff making all the customizations and tweaks as people hit road bumps and obstacles if they do, and keeping everyone on track. And then we have a community of all the program members just feeding more inspiration, positivity, and that creates this amazing container for transformation. So this is the process that's worked for so many people, and all the fit fathers are together and all the fit mothers are together, and our team is facilitating this all. And then we have a full year curriculum as far as someone wants to go with their fitness journey, where we get into more advanced stuff like deeper levels of intermittent fasting, different kinds of supplements for longevity. We talk about parasympathetic and getting deeper into that. So it's like a bite-sized learning journey that takes someone through a complete transformation, mind, body, spirit.
That's great. And then when patients or when people come to see you, are they interacting with you live at all, or is it just primarily through content that's already recorded?
Both. I mean, a lot of the
Oh,
the whole baseline structure curriculum is like already recorded right there. Me and my team also do
yep.
live calls. We're interfacing with people, and we're in the chat groups every single day as well. So it's a nice hybrid combination of things.
Cool. Well, walk the listeners through like a day in the life for you. What time do you typically go to bed? What time do you wake up on average?
Yeah.
And what does food, nutrition, hydration, movement look like for you in a typical day?
Beautiful. Okay, so up around 6, down around 10 p.m. And I think it's
Wow.
interesting about that is that changes seasonally. Like right now, I found that I shift a little bit later, and then there's times in the summer when it's getting bright out earlier where I might be up at like 5 and down at like 9. So I like there's a seasonal flux that happens, but as the time I was recording this, that's generally what it looks like. Okay, so wake up. First thing is rehydration. 32 ounces of water. I add some trace minerals in there. So I add some humic and fulvic acids, as
Hmm.
well as some other kind of trace minerals. I believe
Yep.
water and minerals is what the body needs first thing in the morning,
Hmm.
along with sunshine and a little bit of light motion. So what I've been doing lately is I have a cold plunge at my house. I'll get outside, get some
Nice.
sunshine in my skin and my eyes, get into my cold plunge for 3 minutes, and then get some more sun afterwards. I think the benefit of that is you're just getting obviously a really powerful stimulus for your nervous system. And with the cold, it also gives you a lot of benefits to neurotransmitters and stuff like that. And then the light in the morning and trains this whole circadian rhythm very importantly. You're also getting that early morning infrared light, which is so beautiful on your skin. So whole body sunshine is part of my routine. And I think a little bit of light walking around with the hydration. Now, I don't always have a meal like right away. It kind of is I'm a little, because I've been in the game for so long, can be a little more flexible than some of our members and can auto regulate a little bit more. And I'm not as set of like always eating at 8, always eat 11. But oftentimes I will intermittent fast and skip that first meal back. That first meal is typically a shake. And that shake
Yep.
often looks like this. It looks like a plant-based protein powder, one that we manufacture, walnuts, blueberries, some spirulina, almond milk
Nice.
or coconut milk, maybe some hemp seeds, chia seeds, but it's a mostly plant-based, tons of micronutrients, healthy
Is it like a
fats.
pea protein or hemp protein?
We
Hemp
have a
protein.
combination of pea, hemp, rice, and chickpea, like a blend.
Yeah.
That's all clean, heavy metal tested, and all that good stuff.
Yep.
And
Yep.
like
Yep.
that works really well. And what I found just for me, I've been dairy sensitive my whole life, like not just lactose intolerant, which I do
Yeah.
have since birth, but
Casein
like
too.
casein for sure, and
Yep.
even whey. Like I just know that dairy actually will create a mucus response for me. So
Yeah.
unfortunately for me, I just know that that's not ideal for my system, and my mom is the same way. So it's
Can
kind of
you
a
handle
genetic thing.
butter or ghee?
I can handle butter and ghee,
That's good.
interestingly. So both of those work well. So
Yeah.
on that note, sometimes like if I don't have coffee every single day, but if I do, I will sometimes throw some MCT oil, maybe a little of like grass-fed butter in the coffee, and that can hold me off for some time. But that meal one is
Nice.
often light. I believe in light meals. And on a weekend, if I'm with my daughter, we're making some eggs and stuff like that, or we're doing some whatever she eats. She's under 2, so we're eating all sorts of crazy meals. So a breakfast
Yeah.
can look like olives, banana, eggs, chia seed pudding, like a
Yeah.
bunch of crazy stuff, right? Just trying foods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I've been kind of on like so I'll work during the day, focusing on hydration after the meals. I have some different supplements I've been playing around with that are good for just focus and productivity. I can get into those if you want.
Yeah.
Lunch often is a is greens with protein on it. If I do have lunch, this could be as simple as some canned wild salmon or tinned sardines on greens. Or sometimes I don't have lunch and I'm basically only having 2 discrete meals per day. I'm having a mix of some plant-based protein meals. So
Hmm.
sometimes it might be just like quinoa with some mung beans or lentils or stuff like this.
Hmm.
I've been making some of my own einkorn wheat bread, which is
Okay.
sprouted, which is kind of cool. Other times it might be some organ meats or some steak or some fish or just like high quality animal protein sources with some veggies or some fermented veggies. I'm eating a little bit lighter these days, like as I found that I feel a little more productive when I'm eating only 2 meals per day, and I don't need as much food now that I'm not doing competitive bodybuilding. So it's kind of like a little more dialed in. I've scaled back on some of my starchy carbohydrates, so I'm eating less rice, although occasionally I'll have some squash, sweet potato, quinoa, and stuff like that. But that's generally like the routine in the evenings. I am also meditating before I go to bed, which is like a really big, important thing for me. And I work a lot during the day and I watch my blue light at night. So really making sure I stay good with a circadian rhythm. That's kind of like a high level of the day.
Nice. Sounds like you're really practicing what you're preaching. What do you feel about like other foods that may have like higher anti-nutrient level, like some of the legumes or lentils or some of the nuts or seeds? Do you find that some people benefit cutting those out? Do you have any issues? Did you ever cut them out and do an elimination provocation? What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, my thoughts are anti-nutrients, like, they're obviously a thing. And I think some
Hmm.
people are more sensitive than others. So for
Hmm.
example, chia seeds have a good amount of phytic acid in them.
Right.
I can tolerate them just fine. Like not a big deal for me. There are certain lectins in legumes that if I eat those and they're
Yep.
not prepared properly, they will absolutely mess me up. I
Mm.
find that if I soak and pressure cook, if I do have beans or something, let's say we make a chili of some sort for the family. If those beans are soaked and are pressure cooked, I have absolutely no problem
Mm.
with
Yeah.
those
Breaks a
kinds
lot of that
with
down.
it does, right? I mean, a
Mm.
lot of those traditional prep does break down some of those anti-nutrients. But I think there's a lot of vegetables that people should more or less avoid eating. And I think it's for everyone to kind of figure out what exactly works best for them. I think the carnivore and the pure, like, let's remove all plant matter, like maybe throws a little bit of the baby out with the bathwater unnecessarily.
Hmm.
But I think it could be a good place for people to start if they want to really clean up their system to be able to reintroduce foods that feel better for people. But
Yeah.
I am aware of anti nutrients. I'd say, for example, nuts and seeds are something that I often do have as snacks, but I'm getting some of the nuts that are of the lowest anti-nutrients. So I'll eat macadamia nuts, I will eat walnuts, I'll eat pistachios. Like all these are pretty decent from like some of the anti-nutrient perspectives. And I also believe that a lot of high quality animal-based foods can be phenomenal, like the organ meats, the wild, cold, fatty fish with rich in the
Yes.
DHA and all that stuff. Like that's huge nutrient dense food. So I think
Hmm.
looking at more nutrient density and figuring out what feels best for everyone uniquely is a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I focus on having good proteins, good fats at each meal. I think fats
Yeah.
are important just because every single cell has a lipid bilayer membrane. So we need good
Yep.
fats. Your brain and your hormones tend to have a steroid cholesterol backbone, which usually
Yep.
fats are going to be in that and be a
Yep.
part of that. Obviously, they're very satiating, so they prevent you from overeating. And then,
Hmm.
from there, carbohydrates, I think mostly vegetables just because of the nutrient density, and then dialing that in based on your activity level,
Yeah.
your metabolic type, how active you are you
Yep.
insulin resistant, do you have metabolic syndrome, then you can just kind of adjust that lever according to kind of where that person's at. Would
You
you
nailed
agree?
it. I completely agree. And I'll also say from a behavioral component, just because a lot of people are used to having a carbohydrate serving at dinner, not to say you have to have this, but if you have kids and you're preparing for a family, like I'm just trying to tell people because we've had so many people be massively successful with our approach. It's okay to have like 3/4 of a cup of some kind of cooked carbohydrate, which is like
Hmm.
30 to 40 grams, at dinner. If that works for you and you're having some like lower GI, like healthier carbohydrate. I find one of the biggest things for people is not eating too late as well for like glycemic control, giving some time to eat where digestion can happen. And yeah, the carbs can be dialed up and down based off of activity level, but they can certainly be in the plan and it can be sustainable that way.
Yeah, and it seems like kind of carb backloading, bodybuilding principles seem to show that doing a little bit more of your carbs at dinner tends to be better than spreading them out throughout the day. So kind of a little bit more lower carb maybe in the first part of the day, and
That's
then
what we do. Low carb
yeah,
breakfast, and we
yep,
can give people a serving. And again, it still might be under 100. It's certainly under 150 grams of carbs a day. It might even be under
yeah,
100. And you're still, if you're eating around 100 grams of carbs a day or less, and you're moving, and you're focusing on healthy fats and proteins, and you're doing some high intensity exercise, you're going to be sensitizing your body to insulin. Like you're going to improve
yeah.
your insulin sensitivity, and that's the holy grail. I think the
That
holy
is,
grail is we want metabolic flexibility,
yeah,
meaning we have access through like things like fasting and lower carbohydrate diet to burn to beta oxidation to producing ketones as we need them.
yes.
We can eat carbohydrates. Insulin works well, gets down to baseline levels. So that's when we're really cranking, and I think that's great. And I think actually a lot of people do find this is not for everyone because there's certain people who do really great on low carb keto diets, like very long term. But a lot of people do find after a certain point, one, it can be behaviorally tricky, but two, it can cause a degree of insulin resistance when you're completely low carb for a very, very, very long time. And I think metabolic flexibility, meaning you're having some periods of feeding carbohydrates around exercise, or at least a carb refeed once in a while, tends to work better for people as a leptin stimulating effect. And it just generally, it works for a lot of people that I see.
Yeah, sometimes you get a little bit more glucose output through gluconeogenesis
Yes.
and the protein that you eat if you're
Sure.
overly low carb. So, I mean, I
Yes.
think having some kind of a cyclical variation, unless you were like
Yes.
incredibly insulin resistant, but some kind of a cyclical introduction of carbohydrates and maybe even timing it at certain times of the day,
Yep.
or compressing your feeding window, kind of like intermittent fasting principles would do, or also just movement after a meal, just a 5 or 10 minute walk after a meal. I've
Well said.
seen 10, 20 mg per dl blood sugar drop in just
100%.
10-minute walk. So there's little strategies you can tweak, I think.
And if you're gonna have carbs, time around exercise, like or time
Yep,
around exercise days. So like let's say you're not
yep,
exercising on a one day, you could have a lower carbohydrate day. Let's say you did some
bingo,
strength
yep,
training. Don't be afraid to reload some of that glucose afterwards. I mean, strength
yeah,
training is a stress on the body. Like you are going to raise cortisol levels. Insulin does help lower that post training. It does help drive amino acids and glucose into
it
cells. So it's
does,
like
yes.
not a problem to go ahead and do that post training. So that's a good way to kind of just think about your carbohydrate intake.
That's great. And so, what are some of your favorite supplements that you use to kind of help manage insulin resistance or blood sugar issues out of the gate?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the first thing before the supplements, like what you said about walking after meals, I think is a very underutilized strategy because it
Mm,
activates those good glucose receptors in the legs and can smooth that
yeah.
out. Two, just adding more healthy fats to your meals is going to help your glycemic response more than basically any supplement you could take. That being
Hmm.
said, I think green tea is something that can be good for people,
Yeah.
insulin sensitizing.
Yes.
Good. Like I'm a huge fan of that. I think apple cider vinegar before meals actually shows it has a pretty good effect. Like a tablespoon of that
Hmm.
can delay that blood sugar response.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't know. You can go down the rabbit hole of looking at things like berberine or bitter melon and stuff like this. I don't
Hmm.
necessarily use those all the time, but I mean, those are more like boutique things that can be
Hmm.
beneficial. Yeah, but I don't know if I'm like using. I think exercise, good sleep, green tea, walking after meals, maybe some ACV is like a good baseline.
Yep.
But I mean, chromium and stuff like this, there's a lot of supplements that do have some modest benefit it could be worth it. But I don't know. Do you have a specific supplement that you're a huge fan of for the insulin sensitivity?
Yeah, it's kind of like what you said, right? First, you have to see, does the person need the recommendation, right? And so, a
Hmm.
couple things I'll do is I'll run a fasting insulin and see where we're
Yep.
at. If we're over 10 or 15, then we have some insulin resistance. I'll run what's called a functional glucose tolerance, get a blood
Yeah.
sugar meter, and I'll get a baseline of fasting before a meal and a 1, 2, 3 hours afterwards, and
Hmm.
see how high the blood sugar is going up and how fast it comes down. And so, we can just try making some dietary strategies. If I see that insulin resistance type of pattern,
Yeah.
high blood sugar throughout the day, fasting insulin greater than 10, 15, then we're going to add in some magnesium, some chromium. We're
Nice.
going to add in some inositol,
Yep.
add in some additional B vitamins. We can always throw in some herbal things. It just depends upon how severely metabolically damaged someone is.
Yep.
Guanema, bitter
Yep.
melon, chromium, cinnamon. These are all good kind of nutrients that we can kind of throw in the mix. So I like
Yeah.
that. What are some baseline tests that you're doing with some of the people that you're working with out of the gate? Are you just running like basic blood work? Are you looking at thyroid? Are you ever recommending specific tests, or do you have some just generalized good tests that are just good screenings?
Yeah, I mean, I love people like in a perfect world for people to get, certainly basic blood work, including vitamin D. So I'll say a CBC and CMP,
Hmm.
vitamin
Okay.
D panel. I mean, it's
Yep.
certainly the oral glucose tolerance test or the functional tests are great. Insulin
Yep.
sensitivity is great. Yeah, some kind of general marker if someone wants to get deep on their on just inflammatory marker. This could be high sensitivity CRP or something like this. Could be a benefit. But also, I'd say very importantly is probably like fractionated lipid panels, like more of the advanced ones that
Hmm.
can give you ideas of LDL patterns, density, particle size, particle number can be
Yep.
really cool. I think it's really if you're improving the fractionated lipid panels, if you're improving the insulin and glucose parameters, like you're moving things forward in the right direction. I think those are the main big ones.
And what do you like to see on a fractionated lipid panel? Because I mean, obviously, if your particle size, you want to be more on the particle size A, large, fluffy,
Yep.
buoyant, due to healthy fats, healthy animal fats, keeping
Yep.
insulin, trans fats down. You stay away from the B.
Yep.
Good trig to HDL ratio. I mean, are
Yep.
you worried about cholesterol being higher if your diet's solid and eating some of these really good anti-inflammatory foods? What other markers on that panel, like LP little a or
You
LDL
you you
number?
you basically nailed all of them. Like you want to look
Yeah.
at ApoB, you want to be look at LP little
Yep.
a, which is genetic risk factor for that someone will have maybe needs tighter ApoB levels and LDL cholesterol levels. I
But
think
with
we're
some of those, you can't really change too much with diet, though,
right.
right?
LP little a, you can't. You just might
Yeah.
want to be even a little tighter. So if you have LP little a, for example, it
Yeah.
might be a reason to make sure that your total cholesterol and your total ApoB and your total LDL is a little bit on the lower side than someone else who maybe doesn't have an LP little a. But I can't say I'm a deep expert on this to make a
Yeah.
strong recommendation on that. But I think if someone had LP little a, maybe we keep the total cholesterol numbers a little bit more the lower, which might be just like incorporating more fiber, having some more of the fatty fish, omega-3 kinds of things. I would maybe scale back some of the red meat just a tiny bit for that particular person. But for
Yeah.
a completely other person who maybe doesn't have LP little a as a risk factor, I don't think it's enough just to say, oh, you have high LDL, like you're in a problematic cardiovascular situation. Like, I just don't think that's the case. There's a lot of people who are very cardiovascularly fit, eating very high meat, high fat diets, who are just going to be fine and have no problems.
How about the apolipoprotein, the apoprotein B? Does that
Oh,
have an action item attached to that for you?
yeah, I mean, I think that for sure with particle size, particle number, I think it's a good, it's a representation, I think, of like of the LDL and the risk for cholesterol to be oxidized. So I mean, yeah,
But
I
if their
think it.
particle size A is good, right? And then let's
Mhm.
say you look at like their inflammation markers. Like let's say you
Yep,
see fibrinogen and is
yep,
good. Their HSCRP is below 1, homocysteines below 8. They have
yep.
good inflammation markers. Does that change how you look at some of the cholesterols?
100%. I think what's dangerous about those ApoB patterns of cholesterol is in the presence of systemic inflammation. Like that's when those become particularly
Hmm.
dangerous, in my opinion. So, I mean, you're looking at the whole total picture. That being said, I think people with high ApoB levels could do some good stuff to bring it down. Okay, here's a supplement that I think is very beneficial for a lot of people: Tocotrienols. Are you playing around
Yep.
with those? Like the special kind of vitamin E, the
Vitamin
tocotrienols?
E.
Yeah, but not tocopherols, not alpha.
Right.
Yeah, the tocotrienols, they're like
How's that
structure.
different specifically? I've heard, I know of them, and I will use them with people with cardiovascular risk. But how is that different than your typical vitamin E?
Oh, amazing. They're like, they are fundamentally different because basically these tocotrienols, like all of our cells have the fatty bilayer. We need to keep the fat
Yep.
integrity, it's hugely massive. And that's one of the reasons why we need cholesterol, but also the omega-3s get constituted into those fats for more membrane fluidity. The
Yes.
tocotrienols are fascinating because they basically lodge themselves in the outer layer of the fats, and they prevent the fats from oxidation.
Oxidizing.
Yes, right. But here's the cool thing. Like the tocopherols and the regular vitamin E's are very long. Imagine them like a long whip and they're moving around. The
Yeah.
tocotrienols are substantially shorter. They're like, I'd say almost like half the size, so they can move around a lot quicker and they can cover a lot more ground with how they actually do motion on the cell surface. They have a substantially higher prevention of lipid oxidation at the cell bilayer. And so they're just a lot more effective for that. They have a natural kind of statin effect without actually affecting, the actual cholesterol synthesis pathways. They protect fats from oxidation. Like what we know is you want healthy fats. You don't want your fats to be oxidized. And tocotrienols are just massive for that. People who take them typically can see LDLs drop by as much as 20% after taking these for like 2 to 3 months. And they have a ton of other benefits on top of just the fact that they can be cholesterol lowering, protect the cells. So tocotrienols are great, and they're hard to get in foods. Like you're getting it from annatto, you're getting it from rice bran oil, but not in the significant amounts. So it is a good supplement to take with a fatty meal. I also think people focusing on the omega-3s, whether you're eating cold water fatty fish or taking a high quality supplement, is like a great thing because it's a systemic anti-inflammatory, obviously helps with the cell membrane, helps with brain function. And I think we're kind of meant ideally to eat some cold water fatty fish. It just tends to be good for humans for the most part, right? And I'm sure you wouldn't argue with that. I also think the C minerals like the iodine is something that we need a lot more of that we're not getting as much of, obviously for thyroid output, but because we have a lot of environmental toxicants in chemicals like fluoride, these different kinds of things.
Bromine.
Bromine, another one, exactly right. These electronegative compounds affect the thyroid. So getting back and connected to that, exactly, you got it. So those are important aspects.
Well, that's interesting on the vitamin E, right? Because you're talking about the tocotrienol, so they're smaller, they can dock in there, so they're preventing a lot of your mono and polyunsaturated fats that you eat that are on the healthy side, whether it's avocado, olive, fish oils, so you can get more therapeutic levels of those and not oxidize. So that's good. And then it's helping to lower cholesterol, but not blocking that mevalonic acid pathway. So you're not blocking CoQ10 like you would with like a statin. So you're still modulating cholesterol, and so that may be important if someone has a great diet. And they're still having some lipids that are a little out of whack, and throwing those on there as well.
100%. I think
would you add niacin too, or any other B vitamin?
I would 100% add niacin, and I think that's a supplement. And actually, I'm like more of a fan of actually giving niacin, like as opposed to a lot of the niacin derivatives. This is just like my current thinking on this. A lot of people are using the niacin derivatives for anti-aging effects. I think niacin itself is really great. My personal protocol that I'll do on occasion is like use flush niacin and get in an infrared sauna, like is a pretty powerful practice. And when you're giving niacin too, I think if you want to get down the rabbit hole, it's important also to give a source of like methyl groups, like trimethylglycine or something like that can be the healthy thing to add with the niacin.
Just taking HCl, okay? Is that enough?
I think that's fine. I think it's fine. I think TMG would be more beneficial. But I think it's really good with the niacin to use that. It'll be good for like circulation. Cholesterol levels will even go down using the niacin. And I've been using like a sustained release niacin lately that's in like a little bit of a wax tablet. Tends to help me feel really good. Some other stuff that I actually been playing around with is, and this is now, we're getting into a little more boutique territory now, but some high dose, like mega dosing of thiamine, vitamin B1. Using there's Dr. Longsdale is like a guy who's done a lot of work on this kind of stuff. And what they're finding is just because of thiamine's importance with electron transport chain, or like, I guess like Krebs cycle is what I should say, and just ATP production, megadosing thiamine just helps the mitochondria work like crazy good. And I'm talking like taking up to like 2-3 grams of thiamine, but a particular kind called lipothiamine or allithiamine, which it allows it to cross the blood-brain barrier. Like this is something that they found at a dosage of around 30 milligrams per kilogram, which is quite high, dramatically increases exercise performance. It has secondary benefits to nitric oxide pathways, basically helps your body produce more ATP. So I've been messing around with that. I've also been on a big nitric oxide kick in my own personal protocols. The one prescription that I do take is a low dose of Cialis or tadalafil, because it helps. PDE5 inhibitor helps with NO synthesis, and like some from erectile dysfunction may take, let's just say, 50 to 100 milligrams. I'm taking like 5 milligrams a day, just a little bit. You get more blood flow. And I have a couple other things that are helping with nitric oxide. I think that's something a lot of people over 40 can optimize. You just have lower levels naturally. And so optimizing the oral microbiome is a big part of the nitric oxide pathway. The bacteria on the tongue is what helps, convert the nitrates to the nitrite, which is the precursor to nitric oxide. So eating foods that are naturally high in some nitrates, like this could be an example for arugula, which is a good grain like arugula or rocket. This does not have a lot of anti-nutrients. It's not like, it just generally has a lot of good nitrates. Like that could be a benefit to there. You can also take lozenges for some nitrates, and exercise can be good. And some of these other nitric oxide precursors, that's something I take pretty seriously.
That's cool. And then you're talking about the niacin derivatives. Which derivatives? Like niacinamide or like
Yeah,
NADH?
that's
Which
either
ones are you talking
one
about?
of those. But niacinamide might be one that there's a lot of talk on that, like NAD plus, NADH, niacinamide, any of those. I have not been taking those, and I actually think like there's been just a lot of stuff around resveratrol, niacinamide, all these different kinds of things, and I think feeding a pathway more upstream tends to be a better move.
Mhm.
And so I'm just using some time release niacin right now.
Cool. What other kind of nitty gritty lab tests are you doing with your patients in the Fit Parents group? Like, you talked about your typical blood work. Any other specialized panels? Anything else looking at the gut or gut function?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like I'm not running these exactly specifically for people like the advanced gut diagnostics, but I'm a huge fan
Mm.
of like the GI map, stool sample
Hmm.
testing, looking at, different fat and secondary metabolite derivatives in the stool and getting a good sense of the microbiome and is there inflammation happening in the GI tract. I'm a big fan of the functional GI testing. But like our kind of model helping fit fathers and fit mothers is, not as much about going down the advanced diagnostics. Thankfully, practitioners like you are out there for people. We're supporting like a large number of people. So I am
Yeah.
personally not getting down too much of the rabbit hole on all these functional GI tests, but I'm a huge fan. And I also think too, outside of functional GI testing, like what everyone at home can do right now, regardless of the test, is like to really just get in sync with the signs that your body is literally showing to you at all times of like
Mm.
how your digestion function is. Like
Hmm.
look at like start to study your stool. Look at the whites of your eyes. Are you seeing
Hmm.
inflammation in some of the microvasculature around your eyes? So like checking in with skin and stuff like this. Like our body's telling us, are we inflamed? Is stuff not working right through all these different elimination and service pathways too?
That makes sense. Well, anything else you want to leave the listeners with, or a fit parent, fit mother, fit father that's looking to kind of enroll in your group? Anything else you'd want to let them know about to kind of entice them to jump on board, or anything informative that'd be helpful for them?
For sure. I think we like covered a good range, and I think it was fun
Yeah,
to get into some of the more boutique higher
yeah,
end, stuff there. And like, listen,
yeah.
that stuff's interesting. It can truly move the needle for someone who's super dialed in. But the fact is, like, if you've been struggling for a long time to create sustainable change, it's because you haven't nailed this daily routine and system. And just like immersing yourself into learning a language, one of the best things we found is getting you into a structured program where you can work it at all angles. You can work the mindset,
Mm,
you can get on nutrition, you get on the exercise. It's like the actual process is more important than the details. The process is getting into this immersive experience where you follow along something, where you're not making up your own protocols and just trying to piece together bits of information, because you're still, if you're trying to do that, operating in the framework of your busy life, trying to cherry pick some things, trying to both be the executive of your plan as well as the athlete. And like, just look at the greatest athletes of all time. Michael Jordan had a shooting coach. Kobe Bryant has a shooting coach. Like, these people get into coaching relationships where they can sit in the pocket and just execute. I think for busy people, like that's really the best thing to do. And I'm saying join someone's program. Either you work with you directly one-on-one with all of your different kinds of coaching and lab testing, or come join a community like ours. Like, get into a structured program, commit to that, and then just follow through and get into action. And then you're going to see the kind of results, and you can move out of intellectualization and into actual action.
very good. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Anthony. We put your coordinates and links down below in the description. So if you guys are driving or working out, feel free to click that link and jump over there. Where else can people go to find more info about you?
So
What are your coordinates?
fitfatherproject.com or fitmotherproject.com are our main websites. And then also our YouTube channels are phenomenal. So if you type Fit Father or Fit Mother in YouTube, or Fit Father Project, Fit Mother Project, I think we have over 600 videos on YouTube. Many of them are absolutely fantastic. And
Oh,
we
great.
go deep into, many of the topics around nutrition, exercise, mindset, sleep, supplements, all this stuff on the YouTube channel. So check us out on YouTube, subscribe there, and you'll be able to get all of our great content.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Anthony, for being on the podcast. Appreciate it. You
Thank,
take care.
thank you.